the other side of writing a book. What sort of book it is. It can be a business book, it can be a memoir, it can be anything. It can be a children's book. The process of writing will change your life. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Artist and Author Hour. I'm your host, Tony Lontis, and as you know, each and every week we bring you phenomenal authors from across the globe, and today is no different. If you're watching this show on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, or Twitter, on our own network, the Everyday Women's Network, or on Tony TV, we are so delighted to have you here with us today. And remember, if you miss any of our shows, you can watch catch-up shows on Binge Networks USA under the Tony TV banner and on our own network television, Everyday Women's Network. Now, what I need to remind you today is that we have a subscription now open for Everyday Women's Network. It's just $6.95 per month, where you get access to phenomenal female-centric content. In addition to that, every subscription participates in a social platform, either one of global importance or women and children importance, and the charities that support women fleeing domestic violence, childhood sexual assault, trauma recovery, healing, and helping the planet. Now, before we get on with the show, each and every week we do a special welcome to country, and it's part of an international effort to acknowledge the wonderful contribution of our Indigenous people to our country's development and cultural identity. So today, I want to respectfully acknowledge the people of the Yugambeh language region on the Gold Coast, Queensland, Australia, and pay my respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging, and all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders watching or listening today. Our guest today, and the title of this interview is called War on the Hearts of Men with Eli Coberly. And I can't tell you how absolutely delighted I am that we get to talk to Eli today. He is a phenomenal, inspirational person, and here's what you need to know. Eli Coberly's exploration of how numerology, symbolology, etc. caused, pardon me, I'm going to start that again because it's too important to stuff up. Eli Coberly's exploration of how numerology, symbolology, vibrational resonance, and sacred geometry depicted in Mayan stone carvings points to our destructive past and our potential collective world healing. War, competition, subjugation, that's the engine that's run the world since the dawn of agriculture. The sublimation of the feminine, the illusionary principle of separation. In Eli's powerful book, War in the Hearts of Men, he traces how we arrived at a world where men feel compelled to dominate, to hide their tenderness and compassion, to show their toughness, and to propagate war. How this is leading the planet directly down a path of self-destruction. But this book isn't a societal treatise. Eli's quest didn't come from sitting in a library studying history. It began with his own harrowing experience as a teenage paratrooper, seeing the endless neglect, emotional abuse, physical battering, and loss of life stemming directly from societal conditioning. But that's just the starting place. Eli's quest went deeper into the heart of man's soul and symbolism, beginning with the Mayan culture, as seen through its stone-carved symbols and hieroglyphs throughout Central and Southern America. He then began seeking echoes of the war-infused collective imagery in the cradle of civilization among the ancient Egyptians, through his extensive travel in the Americas, he sought answers from art, architecture, and plant medicine. He feels that today we are still driving our underlying destructive collective subconscious, keeping us from the truth of our oneness and unity, from living lives of compassion, collaboration, and ecological salvation, and the full integration of healing the feminine into the world. Now, without further ado, I would really love you to meet Eli. Welcome to the show, Eli.
Thanks for having me, Tony.
Now, there's a whole lot more in that introduction, but I'm actually really keen to get on and chat to you. And I thought we'd start with a wonderful quote that you cited, and it says, "Transformation through mythological symbolism can unlock our perception of who we think we are and propel us into who we are destined to become. I believe that humanity's struggles have taken place so that we might become closer to our essence." Eli, that's wonderful quote. I love it.
Thanks.
Did that come to you? Is that something that you read? Because when I searched for it, I couldn't find a reference. So it's yours, yeah?
Yeah, I wrote it. Yeah, it's kind of harkens back to a lot of Jungian stuff and Joseph Campbell that I've read, and it makes sense for me that this journey that we're all on collectively and individually is something that brings us closer to ourselves and each other.
Absolutely. It was a real joy to read about you and your life and what's gotten to you to this point. So can you tell the audience, who is Eli?
Well, I'm just a regular American. I grew up in a very rural, small town, and had a lot of viewpoints that weren't really my own, that I just adopted from other people that I saw and that I grew up with. And in where I grew up, you could either be a farmer or a logger, lumberjack.
Mm-hmm.
And those were the only two options. So I joined the army, and I wanted to get out of the town as quick as I could. But since I've just developed myself as an author and a writer and a mystic, and got into yoga, and really just a regular person with not much of an education who decided to make a difference.
Amazing. I think that you're going to make a huge difference. Eli, tell us what the war in the hearts of men is about.
Well, it's certainly metaphorical. I mean, the war is sort of like, we have this sort of idea on what it means to be a man and also what it means to be a woman. And there's two qualities within the individual, that's feminine or masculine. And it's not necessarily about the sex. And
correct.
And so that's sort of like the centrifuge of it all. We have two opposing forces in nature all the time. And I wanted to write metaphorically about what man has went through and what mistakes that he's made and why.
Because if we think about war, it really is and invokes masculine energy, doesn't it? So if we mention a well-known president who is currently at war, it really evokes a very masculine sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every time a president's got his own agenda, and I like, I use the Bush examples back, when I was in the military. It's like one father decides, the first one, the senior, he decided to have a foreign policy, and he didn't quite do what he wanted. So the young guy, the son, picked it up and, carried the torch for all of his inadequacies and led us into war.
Yeah. And war is no good for anyone. And I don't know any woman who would vote for war or who would willingly and knowingly send her sons and her daughters off to war. it's just not something that is within our scope. And I just don't think in this day and age that we should be at war over land, for instance, should we?
No, I mean, it's inevitable the way it was set up with agriculture and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of the possession that comes from possessing land also comes hand in hand with possessing women and their freedom,
Yes.
all sorts of things. I'm not political about, like, because I believe everyone has their choice and their sort of viewpoint and how they were raised, but I do
Yes.
feel that the feminine aspect is a strong force that is nothing to be ashamed of if you're a man.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's important to point out, Eli, is that within each human being, there is both masculine and feminine. And when those energies are balanced, it's a very beautiful thing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Um it's not, doesn't mean homosexual or
Correct.
kind of things. And a lot of people wouldn't even think about that who are raised
No,
that way.
I know. And it's not, people are not encouraged from a young age to question what they've been brought up with, are they? It's often trauma or taking us out of our environment that causes us to reflect on the perspectives that we might have that we could have better understanding, better perspectives, better knowledge if we just think about why do we think that way?
Yeah, I mean, think for yourself, question authority, I say.
Absolutely question authority. It's been my problem. Well, according to certain people around me, it's been my problem all my life. But I can't help curiosity and questioning. I love to know other people's perspectives and ideas and why they think that the way that they do. And so, Eli, understanding that you might have had that very typical American upbringing, it's wonderful to see the evolution of that in your life.
Yeah, I mean, it's what saved me, honestly. I
Yeah.
couldn't imagine being, I mean, I lived in the small town, and my brother lives there, and I love the people there and stuff. But for me, it was just too small. I felt like a
Yes.
big fish in a small pond. And I
Yeah.
thought, wow, look at all these other cultures, look at what they're doing.
Yes.
And especially after I went to Saudi Arabia when I was deployed in the army
Yeah.
overseas, I was like, wow, this is a whole different world. And look at all these people doing different things. And, totally,
Amazing.
yeah.
What was the thing that drew you into Mayan cosmology? Because it's this backdrop of the story. So what was it that triggered that first interest? Do you remember, Eli?
Yeah, well, my grandfather was a geologist, an amateur geologist, an amateur archaeologist. And when he was on his deathbed, I asked him, I said, "What do you believe in heaven?" And he said, Eli, there's other dimensions and other things at play in this world. And I'll just leave it at that. Because he
Yeah.
wasn't very spiritual, say, but
Yes.
he did understand other things in other ways. And also when I was young, I married really young, and I had a wife that was studied the goddess overseas over in Ireland and stuff like
Yes.
that. And
Yes.
she got a degree in spiritual women's studies. And
Wow.
so, yeah. And so I realized, whoa, there's a lot of really old cultures with other beliefs. And that was fascinating.
Yeah. I have to agree with you, Eli. I find it immensely wonderful to read about other cultures and what they did and how they did it. And it gives you that bigger, wider view of life and in particular spirituality and a different way of thinking of other dimensions and higher consciousness. This amazing book has a real message, Eli. Would you like to tell the audience what that is?
Sure. Well, Maya in Sanskrit and from India the Vedic tradition, that means the illusion. And so I thought, well, with war, there's always some guy or some leader who's kind of like a magician, and he's always using these symbols and these ideas to sort of get his idea across on how we should act, or who we should attack, or there's just all this energy, right? And they're moving the energy like magicians to get their agenda across.
Yes.
And so I just thought, well, if Maya means illusion, then what kind of illusion were the Maya people under? And then I studied symbolism behind the serpent, just like in Central America, like the Garden of Eden. And I sort of correlated the two and my understanding on how they were influenced by a faraway culture, like the people of Mexico City, how they influenced all the little Maya cities. Wow. And so I thought, the foreign policy of the U.S. government is to influence and colonize, and also, British Europeans to colonize all the different countries, and they're indigenous.
Yes.
So it just made sense that there's magicians and moving throughout time and space, influencing the indigenous to take their land. And I'm sure you can relate.
Yes, most definitely. Eli, when you think about your journey, who have been some of your most important teachers?
One of my favorites that I keep on going back to is my meditation teacher that I learned from B. Alan Wallace. And he's out of Santa Barbara, but he's an American, but in the late 60s, he ended up in Dharamsala, India with the Dalai Lama after he was exiled. And so he's just an amazing teacher. He's a Lama, and he's just like, I studied dreams with him and to dream yoga and stuff. So he's just well beyond his life already. It's pretty amazing what he has to offer.
Isn't it wonderful that I call myself a baby in my understanding of spirituality, but to see some of the great leaders in this space and to see how they live their lives and how they teach and how they teach others, it's really a very special thing to observe and to know, particularly in this day and age, when I feel that the Earth's energy is changing and evolving rapidly, and to see that more and more people are less inclined to put all things in the woo-woo box. More people are encouraged to think outside and go, well, that's actually a good way to live. Half an hour of meditation of a morning and those things, they're good for the human soul, aren't they, Eli?
Yeah, absolutely.
And we were meant to be spiritual beings as well as having a human body.
Yeah. Another practice I really got into is bhakti yoga, which is the devotion and love. It's this singing and chanting, the stuff of the Vedic people. So, but my teacher, Saul David Ray, he's an amazing guy, a good friend of mine, and he's out of Southern California also. I recommend him. Yeah.
I've just had a couple of recent experiences that opened my mind and my knowledge around sound. So two of those, a friend of mine who is a wonderful spiritual teacher has an app, I guess you would call it, where you speak into the app and it returns to you a voice and sound bite specifically aimed at what energy you might be missing in that time and place. So I had a number of these come back. One was in the C minus and et cetera, et cetera. And then I've recently been to Bali to a place called the Pyramids of Chi, just not far from Ubud. And the woman leading that session, I've never, her voice would come close to what I would describe as angelic, and the way that she used the sound bowls, the drums and different percussion instruments plus her voice in both speaking voice and singing voice was just amazing. The hour in that situation I felt it went in seconds, but the overwhelming energy from just that time in that space, I can still feel it. And I think if other human beings understood what it means to enter those spaces and use that knowledge in healing practices and in life practices, we would change the globe, wouldn't we, Eli?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's no coincidence that everything lines up with the notes to scale and the rainbow and those sort of things. The chakra. Yeah.
Yes. All of it lines up, and it was never apparent to me until recently about how all of that lines up. And I don't profess to have a great level of understanding, just the awareness now, which makes all of the difference. Eli, when you were traveling through Central America, what was your favorite space?
My favorite place that I'm going to be going back to in May for I can't count any times is Palenque
Yes.
in Chiapas, Mexico, and that's the one that has the famous pyramid with the sarcophagus of the cross, and like you'll see aliens or whatever, but it talks about sort of the cosmology, the most that I've found it, and it has the most amazing artwork that I've found in the whole region.
Yes.
So I really love it there.
Yeah. Eli, thinking also about Southern and Central America and the stone carvings and that you saw, what was your big takeaway? What were some of the things that you learnt by looking at these carvings?
Well, I mean, one is that yoga was nothing secret to the Maya people, and I mean, even from the carvings, and I've went all around through the museums everywhere there, and I've got a lot of photos of not only men with beards that look like Vikings. So also I have photos of mudras, Maya people doing mudras, and I've identified a specific mudra that the Buddha used to do about fire and time, which the only people who study fire and time are the Maya people, and then another Far East group. So all these correlations of yogic practice, not only in the carving, but the cosmology as well, and the similarities between Egypt and Palenque, like with the cross group, the specific
Isn't
group.
That fascinating?
Yep.
Because they're not like they're close together.
No, and that's the thing is what I write about is either there was some sort of metaphysical connection or there was an actual connection.
Correct.
Between trade routes and things like that, and it kept on happening over and over again, because in different time periods there was layers of art and cosmology that was woven into the culture,
Yeah. Eli, of all your adventures, which one was the most illuminating, the most hair-raising, and the most thrilling for you?
I would have to say El Mirador in the Petén region in Guatemala. I had made a mistake because it's the internet at the time didn't have the best information, and I went on foot instead of taking a mule. It was 80 kilometers. I thought it was going to be like 37 or something. And so I died coming out of the jungle there with my partner at the time. But in the process, it was a very, very illuminating situation where, the El Mirador means the view, right? And so we were two in love people, and we were trying to get to know ourselves at the same time. And to me, it was a very cosmic experience, and I wrote about it in my first book. But yeah, I would say that place is one of the most remote places in the world you could think of.
And there's not a lot of remote places left, is there, for humans to escape to?
No, and this was the cradle of the Maya civilization. So it was The
Oh,
story that was found there predated Christianity by at least 100 years.
yeah, yeah. Was there an energy to that place, Eli?
Yeah, I mean, there was magicians there too. I mean, they were known
Mm,
for kind of like uh, cosmological
mm, mm,
people who were studying the sun, moon, and stars, and I could feel an old history. I mean, it just tangibly, I could feel it.
mm.
It was, and later after I went there, a year or two later, they found that the civilization was not only much older, but also there was like 1 million people who lived there. They didn't know that when I visited, and they found it
Mm.
with the light ranging detection.
Yes, yes, yes. I want to go back a bit to your time after you came out of the army, and
Mhm.
are you happy to talk about PTSD? The reason I ask is not because I know that it is something that you can talk about, is that it's been very present in my own life and that of my daughters. So, can you talk about that experience with PTSD, Eli?
Sure, absolutely. For me, it was you know, I pretended that it wasn't that big of a deal, the kind of things that I saw, and I speak frankly,
Mm.
if you don't mind. Um, like one example was someone who was jumping out of a plane, and I saw their corpse, and I pretended that I didn't see it. I didn't remember after they hit the ground. I parachuted right behind them, and
Yeah.
these kind of things where you have in your mind, you just literally blank it out and you forget. And then I numb myself with drugs and alcohol, and that
Yes.
was a thing that and all of a sudden 25 years later,
Mm,
and I sober up, and I'm kind of wondering, okay, what's my life like now,
mm,
and sort of what was my role in all this. And I
mm.
write the book, and then the the day that the book comes out is the day that the army uh, decides to give me my pension. So for PTSD,
Wow.
it's the same period. It was like the process of the writing uncovered the PTSD. I didn't write about PTSD in the book. I wrote about the
No.
experience, but it
Yes.
was experiences of and the experience of writing that brought up something I had to deal with, and that was
Yes. Yes.
the stress, right?
Yeah. PTSD is just so it's wonderful that our human brain can protect us from trauma, but the the problem is that then it doesn't allow us to deal with the trauma, and often we end up in the mind-numbing addiction of drugs or alcohol or whatever it is, trying to not deal with it. um what role did psychedelics play in that recovery, Eli?
Well, for me, I did ayahuasca once. It was over
Mm,
the course of a weekend in
mm.
2015,
Yes.
and the change was astronomical. Literally, I had died, and I left my body, and I went up. I felt it leave, and I looked down, and then I decided to come back. I was deeply sad about checking out early, and so
Yeah.
I came back, and when I came back, I made a choice to be a greater service to humanity, and that
Mm.
was really the catalyst of the plant medicine. And so, but I also in the process, and I learned sort of what's better for people with my type of experience, and it wasn't that situation.
Yeah.
Um and so I've since found a couple of groups that I think are doing real great work around,
Mm.
that are actually veterans themselves, that are helping people. Like they have a Western medical contingency, they have a
Yes.
psychologist,
Yes.
and have like a doctor on
Mm.
site,
But the
as well as
research is powerful in terms of the good that can be accomplished.
oh yeah, absolutely. And back then we didn't even know what a microdose was.
Mm.
It was all just large amounts to numb ourselves, and
Yeah.
that's kind of how I treated it. And so now they're really paying attention to the set and setting and the
Yes.
dose. It's
Yes.
nice.
Yes, which is a wonderful thing. I have a fundamental belief that the earth has the answers to any condition in human suffering, in via the plants in particular. And I think that we have so much yet to learn, Eli, particularly from those remote areas where we may not even know what amazing plant life or herbs or that could help human suffering in some way. So, and I think that that's part and parcel of the human earth experience, is around learning what works and what helps. And if it comes from Mother Earth, it has to be better than anything synthetic. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I watched a lot of friends
Mm.
that were in the military, or even just people that I know who have psychological issues that are getting these meds that never really turned out that well. There's always a
Mm.
side effect from them. Everyone
There
knows
is.
it.
Yeah,
And then you
there
take
is.
another, and then there's another side effect.
Mm.
But with the earth-based medicine, it's pretty if you don't dose yourself too hard, it's pretty
Yes.
specific and no one really overdoses.
Yeah, that's right. I had a wonderful conversation this morning with a lady living in Mexico who is delving and learning about traditional herbal Mexican recipes.
Mhm.
And she talks about, dried flowers and different plants and what they help with, and the experience that she's had in their healing properties. Because for her, with a complex medical condition, the healthcare in Mexico is not always equivalent to what we experience in Western cultures. And so she went searching for herbal remedies and has found great healing properties in a lot of the things that she's discovered, and often they're ancient recipes that she's been able to use and formulate to work for her. So wonderful advances, I think, that work in parallel with Western medicine to some extent. I'm not sure that the either or is the answer. I actually think the combination of the two will be the best solution. And there's definitely more that we need to learn about the earth and its healing. Eli, I want to talk about world culture and what's happening in the world. And for those of us that have a spiritual practice or understanding, and I would consider that you're much wiser in this realm than I am. But even for me, there is a huge energy shift happening. And I feel, for me, it feels like a rebalancing of feminine energy and essence. What do you see as the steps that will bring us into alignment with a world that is peaceful and collaborative versus fearful, full of angst and anger, which we see in so many places? And you would see that playing out in the US at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe it's about the mother and the mother earth, and if we treat the earth as our mother and we recognize that you wouldn't trash your mother, you wouldn't bad talk your mother, and you wouldn't, take her for all she's worth. And so that's a start, certainly. And then men are, are great assets, and their strength are great assets. So we have this ability to protect the tribe and do it
Yes.
for everyone. But
Together.
yeah, absolutely. And we have this ability to not think about it as in mine and yours, but us, and how what's best for everyone
Mm.
holistically. And I think that and also I've said, people have asked me this too, and the
Mm.
initiation of young men is not happening
Yes.
like it used to, like where
Yes.
you like maybe like the Aboriginal people out in the,
Yes.
you would have the old wise man teaching the young men how to be,
Mm.
those sort of things. We're not doing that, and
We're not.
especially not in America. I know that for sure.
Mm. Mm. We've lost our way, and the only way that we're going to save and protect the planet for generations after us is if we change, and that must happen now. And it does feel like it is. It does feel like there's a shift, but that whole beautiful ideal of living in peace and collaborative sharing is a beautiful image, isn't it, Eli?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm. I'm wondering, of all the practices and all the wisdom that you've gained in your travels, what was the most profound shift for you?
I would say once I got into Tibetan dream yoga, because lucid dreaming it's such a buzz phrase, and everyone knows now what lucid dreaming is, and that's just knowing that you're dreaming while you're dreaming.
Yes.
But with Tibetan yoga, they actually did something about it, Tibetan
Yeah.
dream yoga. And
Yes.
so they were saying, okay, well, I keep on having this dream of a shadowy figure. Well, that shadowy figure might be myself. And if I accept myself, then maybe that could be a way to get over my psychological past or something.
Uh-huh.
Or another example might be like you get stuck in an elevator and you just fly out, and you're conscious of what you're doing, but you're consciously making choices in the dream time that affect your daytime.
And where did you learn about that yoga dreaming itself, Eli? Did you find that about that in the US, or were you overseas?
Well, with B. Allen Wallace, I was actually in Northern California, and I sat at this, and I was sitting there, and they got over and they said, "Who has questions?" And I raised my hand. I was like, "Well, I'm into yoga," and I heard that the point of yoga was to quiet the mind.
Yes.
Well, who can teach me that? And they said, B. Allen Wallace. Go to wherever he's teaching. And I said, okay. And I looked up the next day, and I got a ticket for Singapore. Went to Singapore. I learned meditation with him, and I found out that he was a dream yoga aficionado, and then he led me to another dream teacher, Stephen LaBerge, who worked with Stanford, and then he led me to Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, who is a Tibetan guy that I sat with in Berkeley. So it was just one teacher led me to the next, and I read all the books, and
you find that though, Eli, you often, I've talked to and interviewed enough people now to know that they have one teacher who leads to the next, who leads to the next, who leads to the next, like it's predestined to be that way, that the one starts your knowledge and the next one increases, and the next and the next and the next and the next. And I'm wondering what the benefits of that dreaming are for you personally, and what you've seen in your greater experience with other people.
Well, one, I don't have nightmares. I used to have nightmares.
Yeah.
And if I do have something, like I even had a dream the other night that someone handed me a submachine gun. What am I going to do with this thing? Right. And, I was walking down the street trying to hide it or whatever, but it doesn't, nothing becomes, it's just a dream. Everything's just a dream. Right.
Yeah.
That's a practice. And so if, nothing's really that scary anymore. You don't come from places with as much fear. And so for me, I was mostly deathly afraid of putting myself out there or relationship. And now I'm not afraid of that. I don't have that anymore. But
that's amazing.
I just stopped having nightmares, and I started believing that anything's possible, where I was really shut down emotionally before I made conscious choices in my dreams to affect my days better. But I still am a nervous wreck at times.
And I do think that for all the things that you learn and all of our abilities to heal, there will still be moments then we will be very human. There will be moments when we experience anger, fatigue, fear. There will be those moments, but in this spiritual journey that you've been on, Eli, it's helped you walk through those times. It's helped you get through and understand, oh, okay, fear. And this is what runs through my head, and what I learned is fear is just a feeling. Fear has no capacity to hurt you or harm you in any way. It's just a feeling, and it will pass.
Mm-hmm.
And when you talk about nightmares, they're there for some sort of reason, aren't they? There's always something behind or underneath, and if you can embrace that and go, okay, what's this about? What's this trying to teach me about? I'm curious, Eli, people often talk about dream journaling, and I'm wondering if you did any of the journaling around your dreams. Obviously, you've written about them, but in true journal form, did you do that at all?
Oh yeah, I have years of dreams stacked up
Excellent.
in my closet, and I look back at them, I laugh because I'm like, oh my God, I was so naive, or what was
Yeah,
I thinking, and you learn a lot just,
just by
because
reflecting.
yeah, you want what you want and you have your desires and you have dreams about them, and it's pretty archaic as time progresses.
You grow and learn and change, and what you believed at one stage is now no longer what you believe now. And
Yeah.
that's the beautiful part of what we can do as human beings, is evolve in our thinking and evolve in our understanding and awareness. That is always good for the rest of the planet as well as yourself.
Yeah, and I'm working on a book right now. I just
Yeah.
started. It's actually a dream journal book. But it's going to take a while because I have one before that. But
Yes.
it's going to be called Dreams to Remember, and so people will read the book, and I'll tell them about some of my dreams and
Mm,
also what some of them mean, and then they can do their own
mm,
journaling, understand certain things about themselves.
yeah. Eli, do you think that people understand how important sleeping and dream states are in terms of healing and everyday life? Do you think people have that general awareness?
I mean, it depends on the person, I suppose,
Mm,
but I think the awareness is becoming more and more as time progresses
mm,
because we're shifting into more of a state of awareness with this
mm.
opening of all the spiritual practices from the
Correct.
East and those sort of things.
Mm. Definitely. One of the final things that I sort of wanted to talk to you about today, and I've left a bit of time for us to discuss this because it's fascinating subject for me, and I admit to being very novice in my understanding. But can you tell me about the Akashic records, how you access them, and what you discovered?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of books out there, and there's a lot
I
of
know.
teaching, and
And it's a bit
there's
hard to go through the Maya. So I'm like, no, I've got Eli. I'm going to ask him.
well, I had a good teacher. His name's
Yes.
Ernesto. He's in a book called Akashic Records, I think.
Yeah.
And I sat with him for a month in Lake Atitlan, Guatemala, and I learned he had this sacred prayer that was passed to him, and it was kind of cool. Actually, this training, there was one person from each continent represented, and it just the way it worked. And so we had
Mm,
this really extensive group of people all studying the Akashic records and the ether of the potential of the past, present, and future,
mm,
and how to, kind of different practices that he uses along with the prayer.
mm.
So I did readings for a while. I don't do them very often,
Yes.
just for friends now. It can be a liability sometimes if people don't take
Ah,
it seriously. So, but most everything that I've done, I didn't want to necessarily be like a teacher, like
yes.
it was like, every week I
It
was
was for
teaching.
you.
Yeah, it was for me, but
Mm,
also I love philosophy and the
mm.
root of why things are. Like I love
Yes.
anthropology and
Yes.
archaeology. So a lot of this was so I could write about it and
Mm,
influence other people to make changes.
yeah.
So one of the things was understanding the Akashic field a little bit to
Mm,
have a leg up on sort of the way to navigate
yeah.
into the soul of people to help.
Mm, mm. So, can you tell the audience how you access Akashic records?
Well, it's a
And and
crystalline.
the other thing, I guess, is for those that have no idea or have never heard the terminology terminology, they're from ancient cultures, aren't they? They had an understanding of these records in ancient cultures. Is that my correct understanding?
Yeah, well, one of the the world's most famous person who did Akashic records was Edgar Casey, and he
Oh,
has a
did he?
yeah, he has an organization out of Virginia, and his family kind of runs it, or his descendants. But he was the one who would predict all the future of people, like, and he was kind of telling them about their past lives, and a lot of it goes back to Atlantis, which is the
Yeah.
mythical
Yes.
kingdom, right, in the ocean or whatever. But so we have that, and the Akashic field is basically the sixth sense, right? You have
Yes.
all these, and they're based on the elements, right? And so this is the ether, where it's sort of like, where is consciousness stored? Well, it's not stored in your brain. Your
No.
brain is a thing,
Mm.
and where is that? And so the ancient people of Tibet and India, and not, what I say is the Maya people, they also
Yes.
knew about this sort of consciousness record place, and they call it the Great Hall of Records. Edgar Casey alluded to it.
Ah.
And so that's where everyone, it's like a giant library, right? Where everything's
Mm.
stored, or maybe a gigantic hard drive
Mm.
of all the
Yes.
consciousness, the past, present, and potential future of the
Mm.
soul of the individual.
And
So go
yeah,
ahead.
go on. You go, keep going.
Oh, well, it's just, so a lot of, like crystals, this is something I believe in, how it kind of works. I've been able to delineate a little bit, is crystals like are millions of years old, or however many
Yes.
years old. And I like to think about, well, when that crystal was made, what was the energy like, right? Or so, like, what was going on in the earth, or what was going on with the structure of
Yeah.
consciousness.
Mm.
And so if a computer is used with crystals, so this crystalline energy is something that's sort of timeless. It's a short
Yes.
measurement of vibration that goes
Yes.
into the past,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah. Wow. Amazing. Um, I want to know for you, Eli, what you see in the next 5 years for you. And now we know that you're got lots of writing, and there's a number of books on that are happening for you. What else? What else do you plan on doing, seeing, having in your life in the next 5 years?
Well, I don't have a huge group of assistants working for me. If
Yes.
if I had one person that was really good at booking events, I would be doing Maya tours and doing yoga and going to all the sites.
Yeah.
Um, so that's one thing, and another thing is, I want to be on TV. Like, if I had my way, I would have a TV show where I retraced all the places I've been to in the book, and in the books that I've written about these places, and I would
Absolutely.
it to people.
Yeah, yeah. Fantastic. Um, what a great um idea to have for you going forward. Eli, your private tours of the pyramids, can you tell the audience just quickly about those? And if they're interested, the best way to connect with you to find out more.
Yeah, well, I go to Palenque often, and I go to Chichen Itza often, and usually just a one-on-one. I've been with a couple of people.
Yes.
I did one in Guatemala years ago,
Mm.
and but what the best way is my website,
Yes.
elicoberly.com, and I'm on
Fantastic.
Instagram as well with my name, Eli Coberly, on Instagram.
Mm. And people can just reach out, connect with you, and ask you about your private tours.
Yeah, absolutely. Just email me.
Fantastic. Eli, I'm really glad that we've had time to chat today. I'm grateful that you've been able to spend time with us talking about your life and your adventures and your learnings and understandings. What a wonderful chat we've had today. I want to let the audience know that we will have Eli's connection details and the links attached to this interview wherever you're watching it, on whatever platform. And Eli, I want to thank you once again for sharing so openly with us today. And I want to wish you all the best love and light for the future.
Thanks, Tony. It was a pleasure to be on your show. I appreciate it.
Was my delight. That, my friends, is your lot for this week. We will be back again with another amazing author on the Author and Artist Hour. I'm your host, Tony Lontis. Please thank Eli, and we will be back again next week. Bye for now. It's not about the book. It's about the person you become on the other side of writing a book. What sort of book it is. It can be a business book, it can be a memoir, it can be anything. It can be a children's book. The process of writing will change your life.